Welcome to tutorial number 7. This tutorial for the exOrion Quick Start uh, guide will help you utilize the project assistant when you are using the risk log. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And for those of you who have not seen tutorial number 1, please go back and make certain that you go through tutorial number 1 and you get your tool set up so that you can actually participate in this tutorial. Okay, so again, the rule of thumb is anytime you see text that is blue or fields where there is blue content in the field, those are fields where you can change the content. Again, I've put some descriptions here in terms of what information you would find useful for the risk log. For anybody who's managed a project as a professional project manager, you know that every project has risk. Not every risk is bad, but every risk needs to be quantified. The reason why you want to quantify a risk is because not every risk is created equal. They will occur occasionally. Excuse me. And what you need to determine is how much of your time or your team's time should they spend trying to deal with a risk versus work on their task. So you have to determine, is the risk really worth it? This is where you use some PMI evaluation techniques. So the first column you see here is how likely is this risk to occur? And so what I've done here is you'll see you type either numbers 1, 2, or 3 in this column. 1 means high likelihood that it's going to occur, or maybe certain. 2 is that it may occur, or 3 is a low likelihood that it's going to occur. Okay, that's the first quantifier. In this case, we have number 2. It's may occur. The next column here is impact if it occurs. If there's risk occurred, what would the overall impact to the project be? 1 means a high impact. It could be detrimental to the project. 2 is moderate. Maybe there's a workaround that can be done. Not ideal, but can be done. And 3 is low. Now, what this next column does is it takes those two values and tries to determine what the priority level overall for this risk is. So if you had to look at this column here to determine which risks should I focus my attention on first, number 1 and number 3. Number 1 and number 3 here are 1.5, almost priority 1. Priority 2.5 is number 2. So if you had to sort of decide which ones you want to focus your attention on or get your team to work on, I would start with these 2 first. Can replace the blue text. This is the description of the risk and of course the overall assessment, expected monetary value if the risk were to occur. Now risk response, project managers will recognize this. There are, they say, 4 responses to a risk. You may choose to mitigate it, which most risks typically have this sort of response. Try to find a way to address the risk so that you get around it. You may choose to accept it. The priority level may be low. It may be one of those things where, okay, a workaround. If that risk were to occur, we have a workaround in place, so we'll accept it if it happens. Then there's avoid. Avoid is you want to remove whatever conditions are in place that are creating that risk. It may be removing that item from the scope of the project or whatever the case might be, but that's how you avoid if you choose to avoid it. And of course, transfer is where the risk gets assigned to another stakeholder, perhaps a contractor or someone else, another vendor. And of course, closed and TBD. So these are all drop-down selections. Okay. And now that you decided that you want to mitigate the risk, you have to identify, or you can choose to identify, which area is being impacted. Is this risk going to impact the schedule? Is it impacting the scope? Maybe the cost of the project is at risk. Maybe the quality of the end product is at risk. Could be the resource risk. You may be losing access to a skilled individual in your team, and that's a huge risk. They may be moving on or getting promoted to another position. Adoptability. So once your product is complete and you hand it off, uh, perhaps this risk is that the end users will not use it or will have problems using it, so there's adoptability. And of course, communication. It just may be that this could be a scenario where perhaps a communication to an executive or to a vendor is not occurring, and they're out of the loop, and as a consequence are creating some risk on your project because they're getting uncomfortable. Again, this is one you can choose, or you can choose not to put that. You can simply put a blank, but I find it helps to keep you focused on what the risk area impacted is going to be. It's also interesting too. You may see a whole bunch of scope items here, and you'll know that this project is just is highly susceptible to scope creep. Risk response details, typically month, day, and what the latest response or the details are on addressing this particular risk. And of course, like an action item and like a task, you also want to assign a risk to somebody. If there isn't anybody who owns the responsibility of managing that risk, nothing's going to happen with it, and your project overall risk goes up. Again, your key contact list is very important because the stakeholders that you can select for responsibility of this risk also come from your key contact list, which automatically updates this tab here. So if I wanted to put Michael Jones as the person responsible for that risk, I go ahead and do that. Now, there's also a calculator at the bottom of this page, and it shows you, it's a legend, and the legend shows you what 1, 2, and 3 mean for likely to occur and impact if it occurs, the priority level, which is this column here, high, medium, or low, and then risk response, just to give you an idea what the risk response options are. And this is a very interesting figure, because what this does is it takes an average of your priority level across multiple risks and says, okay, the overall risk for this project is just a little bit above moderate. It's you're getting close to a high risk project because you have several risks that are just that are closer to the high risk area, the high risk setting. Of course, you see I'm scrolling up and down because there's lots of blank space. If you want to get rid of the blank space, you can pick one of these columns where there's lots of blank space, use the filter, click on blanks to deselect it, click OK, and now you have a very succinct risk log that you can send off to an executive or anybody who needs to have a copy of it. Again, you can change these items here, the project name, the project manager's name, and the project sponsor's name, which I would highly recommend that you make certain you have a name in this column, because oftentimes the risks are going to be ones that will need to be addressed by the sponsor, or they'll have to be aware of it. That's the end of the risk management tutorial. Thanks for joining us.